Okay. Welcome everyone to, the Northampton Urban Forestry Commission meeting, November 19th, 2025. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded. We have a 5-minute public comment period. There are a few members from the public here. Would anyone like to comment during this time? All right. Thank you. Um, you have in the packet that I sent, you should have had the minutes from 11/5. 2025. If you had a chance to read them, great. If not, please take the time to do so and just let me know.
I read them.
Okay, great.
That's me.
Yeah, I did too.
Okay, just waiting for David. No pressure, David.
All right, I've read them.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Um, would we make a motion to accept the minutes?
I have
Oh,
one amendment,
sure.
under the chair slash tree warden report, the
Yep.
second bullet, there was two people referred to as Stephanie and Karen. I think they should either have a title or their last name or something, because I didn't know who they were.
Oh, uh, they're designers, landscape architects from Tool Design.
Okay, so, I
Yep.
mean, that would be fine. I just think there
Yep.
needs to be a
Yep. So
rep.
we can add that. Bonnie, just add somewhere, insert there from Tool Design, please.
Yeah, that's great. I thought that's who it was, but,
Yep.
thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other comments? All right, could we get a motion to accept the minutes as amended, please?
I move they be accepted as amended.
Is there a second?
I will second.
We have a motion to accept the minutes as amended by Rich Parrish and a second from Molly Hale. Any discussion on the motion? There being none. Bonnie, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Absolutely. Rich Paraslitty,
Yes.
Molly Hale,
Yes.
Jennifer Werner,
Yes.
David Lukens,
Yes.
Richard Parrish,
Yes.
and Kent Johnson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So let's see, my and tree warden report. I have one potential public shade tree hearing request in the pipeline for a multi-family unit, new construction on the corner of Gilrain Terrace and Burt's Pit Road, but I need to confirm with the applicant what their requirements are, and if we can possibly move the driveway to a different location to prevent the removal, but I have to reach out to them. So, um,
I know that exact place. There's some beautiful big pine trees there.
there are, and I believe that small home that's there is going to be removed and replaced with a multifamily
Oh,
unit.
wow.
So they need to make the driveway, I think that actually is to the left of the original existing driveway, which is going to be problematic for that pine.
Mm.
So, but I will probably have some more information for you at our next meeting in December. I don't think there's really anything else that I have to report. I did speak with Carolyn Mish, and the mayor about the significant tree ordinance and the the draft that we worked on that that has since been revised with recommended changes from this commission and the planning board or planning office. And given the fact that there'll be a new city council seated in January, the mayor thought it best if we and Carolyn as well waited until the council, because you have to settle out all the committees. There'll be all new committee appointments. So instead of introducing legislation now, we thought it'd be best to wait after the committee assignments in January complete, and then we'll be moving forward from there. So I'll keep you updated on that. And that's all that I have. Anyone have any questions?
You can guess what my question is
Yeah,
probably.
yeah, and I have a no answer at the moment. I'm working on it, but I have like seven other things that I'm trying to get accomplished at the same time that require a lot of attention.
Is
But
there anything I can do to help?
it's possible. So let me reach out to you tomorrow if you're around.
I think so.
All right, I'll shoot you an email.
And I guess we should be thinking about the 2025 planting as well at this point.
Yes, and I think we might talk about that in a couple of bullets.
Okay.
All right, because I think Jen's going to give us a report of the this planting from 2025 and potential future plantings in the spring. Any other questions? All right, so yeah,
Rich, I don't know
yes.
what you and Kent were talking about.
I'm
But
sorry,
So,
it was
it's the 2020, it's
yeah,
the 20, it's sort of,
the 2024 tree
yep,
planting data. So I
yep,
can update my reporting and get maps to Rich Parish for maintenance and just sort of keeping up to date with the record keeping.
yep,
okay. And then when it comes time for Jan to talk about the spring 2026 planning,
yep.
I'd just like to briefly talk about JFK.
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah.
Kent, I might just be able to pull the locations and the species and just put them in two columns on a spreadsheet until I fix everything else. So at least you can have the locations and put them in there. Probably
That's
would be
basically
helpful.
what I need, the
Right.
addresses and the species.
Okay. Let me, I think I can manage that tomorrow easily. The rest of the data, the way that it's been, I don't know what happened. That data is not corrupted, but it's all the actual scientific names and common names they just got all mixed up. I don't know how it happened.
Huh.
I am not an Excel person. I try, but I'm self-taught, so
So
um,
which one is correct? Is it the scientific name or the common name that's
that's the
forgive me?
question. That is the question, and I have to go back to the lists that I received from Jen to make sure that they are correct. So that's the cross-referencing.
Do you know that you can go, I think you can do this in Excel. Maybe it's just in Google Docs. You can go back to previous versions.
Yes, but this version, if I go back anymore, the version will basically zero itself out. It's
Oh,
it's a
okay.
mess. I'm working on it. I keep saying that every meeting. You're probably sick of hearing it, but let me just get Sue. Okay. All right. So I thought it would be I didn't actually we didn't anticipate having a guest speaker at this meeting, but Candace Pounding from UMass is here. And it was sort of an accidental I guess an accidental introduction over the telephone about a tree question because Candace is a Northampton resident. So I asked if Candace would be interested in coming and giving a presentation to the commission, and she agreed. So without further ado, Candace, welcome. Thank you for taking a little bit of your time today to put a presentation together and sort of talk to the commission about the community perspectives on the urban tree canopy loss and regeneration in post-tornado Springfield, which I think would be very interesting to the commission, given the fact that we have been very blessed that we have not had a natural disaster like that here. So it's really interesting to hear the perspective from Springfield and your research on it. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I texted Rich frantically, I think it was like I said earlier last week, because I got word that my landlord was planning on taking down a big silver maple in our backyard, and I'm pleased to announce that they decided against doing that. I was hoping to throw the book at them and then learn that I didn't have a book to throw at them, and uh, I think what ended up happening is they probably got a hefty quote for tree removal because it's quite a large tree and decided to trim it instead. So we love to see that.
Yes, and when all else fails, right, trimming is the fallback,
Yeah.
apparently. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like dreading coming home that day because I didn't want to see the tree gone, and then it wasn't gone, so I was very happy. But yeah, so I'm a PhD student at UMass, studying urban forestry. And I also work for the city of Hartford. I'm an urban forester in Hartford. I run all of the tree planting contracts, volunteer things at the city here. Formerly, I worked in Springfield briefly, but most of my tree experience was from Providence before I came to grad school at UMass. But have done a lot of tree planting and community stewardship over the years. And so a lot of my research is focused on sort of the human dimension side of urban forestry. So I share my screen. All right, can everyone see this? I started just with a picture of the tree that is still standing. This is my backyard off of South Street. So it's silver maple with some problems, but it didn't deserve to die, so it's still standing. But anyway, off to the main stuff. So this is a project that I just concluded, and the paper for it is actually getting published probably pretty soon. It got accepted, but I haven't gotten a publication date on it yet. So when it's published, I'll share it. But I spent a couple years interviewing residents in Springfield for my master's, talking to them about their experience of the tornado in 2011. If many of you may remember when that happened in June of 2011. This is a picture. Here's some more pictures of the day, the couple of days following that tornado. You can see that there just was a huge amount of tree loss that came, within a matter of seconds on that day in 2011. So we really wanted to understand what this experience was like for residents and how they participated in growing back their canopy over the last decade plus. So we started thinking about why are we doing this research? Why is it important to talk to residents about the experience of, okay, so just stepping back for two seconds is after the tornado in the following summer, so about a year after the tornado, there were free trees that were offered to residents who were in the tornado's path. And so we interviewed residents who opted into replanting. So that's sort of the premise. And we wanted to understand how they experienced loss, how they experienced replanting and regrowth, and what we can learn about this replanting process that can be applied to future replanting processes after other disruption events like natural disasters. So we thought this research, why is it important to understand this replanting effort, specifically in the context of natural disasters. So here's a little bit of a logic sequence if you want to follow along with me. So tree loss in cities is inevitable. Tree loss everywhere is inevitable because trees are mortal and they die because of a number of causes. And most cities need to grow their tree canopy. So we're losing trees, but the goal of most cities is to increase the tree canopy over time. And in order to have this canopy growth that cities need, planting and maintenance, so tree canopy growth, has to exceed the rate of loss. So, we need, we all know, we need effective tree planting and stewardship programs. However, we're talking about sort of unusual situation here. So tree loss in cities is generally gradual, so it's usually not super noticeable to the naked eye. It happens gradually. Trees gradually die back. Trees are removed in scattered locations as they die, and don't have a dramatic effect on the overall canopy as they're lost one by one. And tree planting programs that we have and the models that we have are generally suited to address this type of gradual loss. So sort of gradual replanting to address gradual loss. But as we all can realize and saw in those pictures, tree loss caused by severe weather events is not gradual. So it's really a different type of tree loss people experience. And replanting has to consider this post-disaster context where there's dramatic tree loss, but also people are navigating really complex, traumatic, expensive experiences in the aftermath of a disaster, and approaching them and talking to them about the opportunity for tree planting is likely going to be really different. So we have to understand what the tree replanting and the tree regrowth process looks like, so that as we can expect more and more extreme weather, we know how to enact replanting efforts in ways that restore canopy, but also restore connection with the landscape. And so this is just a quick note here. This was a quote from a report from Hurricane Ian a couple of years ago. And a number of reports in the aftermath of extreme weather events note that it's really important for community forests to recover after extreme weather events. But oftentimes the reasoning to replant is focused on the box to the left, which is the restoration of ecosystem services associated with urban tree canopy, which is of course important. We have dramatic tree canopy loss. We also have dramatic loss of these ecosystem services. But there's also this other component that we wanted to explore, which is how does it look when we replant also with this restoration of a relationship that urban residents have with their landscape in mind as well. So like thinking about that as also a factor in the replanting, that residents of urban areas have some kind of connection, whether they realize it or not, to the trees in their landscape, to the look and to the feel of their landscape. And how do we factor this component into our sort of reasoning to replant and the way that we plant, in addition to just, pure restoration of, ecosystem services. So one thing we realize that we don't really know is what this connection is with dramatic tree loss and dramatic landscape change. This place attachment concept, which we'll talk about in a second, and replanting trees. So how does tree loss cause people to feel a disruption in their sense of place, their attachment to place, their familiarity with their landscape, their comfort and ease in their landscape? And then how does that compel them to replant trees? So there's this concept of solastalgia, which kind of just keep in the back of your mind as I go through this talk. And it's this concept that Glenn Albrecht coined in 2005 that refers to the emotional distress and loss of identity associated with environmental degradation and loss of sense of place, an innate desire to reconstruct or return to a familiar landscape. So we'll think a lot about, how does this dramatic landscape change cause this disrupted sense of place, this disrupted place attachment that compels people to recreate what they understand to be a familiar landscape through replanting trees. So back to the sort of nitty gritty, do a little bit of context about how we studied this. So this was the flyer that was sent out to residents of the path of the tornado in 2012. After the tornado, they were offered a free or multiple free trees in their yard, even if they didn't lose any trees, as long as they were within the tornado's path. There were thousands of mature trees that were destroyed in the city, and a couple hundred opted into replanting. So I reached out to anyone who still had an active number and who still lived in Springfield, active phone number, to participate in a research interview for this project. Here's just a quick map of the path of the tornado. So these are the 6 neighborhoods: Metro Center, 6 Corners, Old Hill, Upper Hill, East Forest Park, and 16 Acres. 7 neighborhoods. So these, maybe it wasn't Upper Hill, I can't remember. But it was 6 neighborhoods that were included in this outreach process and received this outreach flyer. You can see here I just included on the right. This is, many of you may have seen the American Forests Tree Equity Score Analyzer. Maybe you've looked up Northampton. If you haven't, you should. But it sort of shows the darker green areas have higher tree equity scores, and the brownish orangish areas have lower tree equity scores. And there's a whole methodology component, but basically it compares tree canopy cover with heat, with income and race, and all these different demographic factors to show, which areas of a city need more trees and more tree care and more, resources allocated to urban forestry work. So most of the neighborhoods, most of the trees planted through this program were planted in the higher canopy areas of this tornado swath, so East Forest Park and 16 acres, and significantly fewer were planted in the dense urban core over to the left. There are probably a lot of factors associated with this, which I go into in the paper if you're interested. But probably a big part of it had to do with the amount of existing trees that were lost. So residents had trees that they wanted to replace. These two neighborhoods, 16 acres and East Forest Park, have larger yards, more single-family homes, higher rates of owner occupancy, all these components that we know have connections to higher rates of residents opting into tree giveaway programs and replanting and planting programs and such, as opposed to folks who lived in the denser core, where there were lower owner occupancy rates, smaller yards, more apartment buildings, that kind of thing. So most of the trees are planted in these two neighborhoods. So, and our objectives were to understand how tree loss associated with the tornado altered residents' feelings about and relationship with their urban forest, how they felt about and interacted differently with their treeless landscape, so after the tornado, and how they made decisions about and experienced the replanting process in the midterm aftermath. So in the early months, year after the tornado, and with tree stewardship in the long-term aftermath, so in this last decade. And then how they felt about their landscape after this decade of regrowth. So how it felt different than in the immediate aftermath. And this related to this sort of multi-stage aftermath concept, which is that the immediate aftermath is a phase characterized by triaging of essential activities. Midterm aftermath, in the context of a disaster, is around the time when people begin to make non-time sensitive decisions. So this is the midterm aftermath would have been when people chose to replant in 2012. So they, a year left of the tornado, they've already figured out where to get their food and water and energies and electricity is restored, so they can start to think about things like tree planting. And then long-term aftermath is, this period of recovery, this long-term period of recovery. And it was important for us to think about long-term aftermath in terms of the urban forest, because as we all know, trees regenerate a lot slower than the amount of time it takes to rebuild a building or fix a road. So you really have to have this long view when researching urban forest regeneration in this way, because people can't really have perspective on change within a year after replanting. It really took a while for people to start to see a difference in their landscape after the tornado. So we performed these interviews, and the interviews were broken into these 4 distinct sections. So the first section was around their pre-tornado impressions of and relationship with nature and the urban forest. So did they have trees in their yard? How did they care for them? Did they care for them at all? Did they like their trees? Did they think that Springfield cared for their trees well or didn't care for trees well? And then the second section was about the immediate aftermath. So what did they remember about the immediate impact and the devastation associated with the tornado, and how did they feel about it? The third section was around the new trees. So this midterm aftermath, where they chose to replant. What species did they get? How were the trees doing over that time? What kind of care did they perform, especially at the beginning in terms of watering and pruning and such? And then the last section was around this long-term connection between loss, stewardship, and regrowth, and how it felt for them to interact with the regrowth and landscape restoration process. So I'm not going to go into this. This is just, these 2 slides are, this is how we coded all the interviews. So all the interviews were transcribed, and we categorized every little word of the interview in all these different categories. So what was their nature relationship categorized as? Did they have positive feelings about their public trees? Did they have negative feelings about their public trees? How about their private trees? What were the characteristics of their memory of the tornado? How did tree loss impact their property? How did they feel about tree loss? So this is just super detailed and unnecessary to go over now, but it was, we very, very carefully categorized like every single word of every interview to figure out how they all pieced together and what kind of themes came out. So here's what we found. So a quick note on the interview subjects. So there were 25 total interviews with 29 subjects. So a couple of interviews were done with pairs of folks. Most of the subjects were retired or of retirement age, which is sort of a common limitation with interview methods. People that have, more time and flexibility in their schedules tend to participate more, or have the capacity to participate more in interviews, which can skew the results. So it's worth noting that all these folks were older, were not still working. So we didn't have perspectives of folks with, folks who experienced the tornado at different ages and that kind of thing. Many were lifelong residents of the Springfield area or Western Mass. A few of them still lived in their childhood home or on the same street where they grew up. All but one of the subjects owned their home. Most of the interviews were held at subjects' homes, so they were able to show me their trees, and we were able to walk around and see where the path of the tornado impacted their street. Most subjects were women, most were white, and the majority had some kind of connection and interaction with nature before the tornado, going for runs in the park or gardening or cutting their grass. So various different types of nature interactions, but all kind of felt some kind of connection with interacting with nature. Though I certainly wouldn't say they were all like tree lovers or tree huggers. There definitely were a number of folks who were not tree huggers. And the representation of the interview subjects was interesting. Like I said, most of the trees that were planted in East Forest Park, 16 acres. However, the vast majority of the subjects that were willing to opt into the interviews lived in East Forest Park. So a little bit into the results here. So in talking about their pre-tornado relationship with trees, so setting sort of a baseline for the tornado impacted their landscape, we talked a little bit about the services and disservices that residents experienced or felt associated with their pre-tornado trees. So the positives, the services they connected with their trees were beauty, shade, privacy, sightline blocking, wildlife habitat, and then just sort of like generally positive feelings about trees, like we love them, we need them, I need them. And then the negatives or the disservices that people mentioned in association with their pre-tornado trees were that they had maybe too much shade at times, they didn't like their cleanup maintenance responsibilities, the expenses of pruning or removal, unsightly impacts of poor tree health or improperly cared for trees. This is particularly in regard to city-owned trees. The idea that their trees were taking up too much space in the yard, they didn't have room for other things, and then sort of general sort of fear or concern about tree-related hazards. So again, these are all things that people expressed in relation to the trees they had prior to the tornado. Then going into their experience of the tornado, so there's a lot of interesting intertwinement of their sort of general disaster memory and the loss of trees. So starting, I'll go from left to right here, something that came up again and again was the association with tree loss and sort of a dramatic change in their relationship to their sort of visual perception of the landscape to the point that it felt foreign. So a lot of interviews you can see here below mentioned places like Florida or Texas or the desert or Oz. Like people were referring to their landscape using these it's kind of sort of comical. And a movie, an alien place, they were describing the landscape as something that was like totally different from their familiar place. to the point where they had to use like these words to describe how foreign it was, like Texas. And so they were associating this loss with sort of like a concept of place that was very far from how they understood their home. Another thing that came up again and again in this like immediate aftermath memory was spatial disorientation and landscape loss. So a lot of people mentioned that they hadn't realized how much they relied on the trees in the landscape as sort of wayfinding markers. So they didn't realize how much they used trees to know when to turn down a street or to know whose house was which. And residents of folks who had lived on the same street for their entire lives had a hard time figuring out which street to turn down to get home. And that was really startling for me because I was not expecting to hear this at all, but almost every interview subject brought this up independently that they had a really hard time navigating their landscape in those months that followed because they hadn't realized how much they depended on trees as wayfinders. And then finally, this of course, one of their connections between disaster memory and tree loss was around damage to property and infrastructure. So the majority of the participants experienced damage to their property associated with tree or branch failure. So there are a few people who received free trees, even though they did not lose or experience damage associated with trees, the vast majority did. So that was really interesting because you might think that if someone's house was completely destroyed by a tree that fell through the roof, you might imagine that they would never want to plant a tree ever again. And I'm sure there are many people for which that is the case, but it was interesting to talk to people in this research process who experienced complete devastation associated with a downed tree and still had the impulse to replant. So we talked about some of those sensory feelings people had associated with their pre-tornado trees, and this also came back up again with the new landscape, so sort of sensory indicators of tree loss. So visual indicators of tree loss, so residents could see things that were previously blocked. There was sort of both positive and negative associations with this, so people saw stop signs and stop lights and buildings that they didn't see before that they wish they still had blocked. A lot of residents expressed how bright it was, especially that first summer. Again, the tornado happened in June, so they immediately went into a hot summer, and people said it was the brightest summer of their lives, which is understandable, and that they missed the shade and their homes and in their neighborhood. And then, like I said before, people didn't recognize their streets. And so that was both in sort of a utilitarian impact, or an impact of the utility of trees, people didn't know where to turn because they didn't realize they had used the trees as landmarks. But also there was sort of an emotional impact of not being able to recognize your own home. People weren't able to take walks in certain directions because it was too painful to go down a street that was unrecognizable to them. And there was this really strong emotional reaction to not being able to recognize their home. And then there's also an auditory indicators of tree loss. So residents expressed hearing a lot more road noise and having a lot more issues with wind. And many residents discussed the loss of bird noises. They said it was an extremely quiet summer in regard to the lack of chirping. It was really startling for a lot of residents, particularly those who enjoyed looking at birds and feeding birds and stuff like that. This picture on the left is one that I took at in the yard of one of the subjects' homes. You can see here, this is sort of a little bit of a graveyard of some of the trees she lost in the tornado. She held on to some of these old stumps and roots and stuff from the trees that came down. That was interesting to look at. So one thing that was also interesting that came up in the research was that people largely lamented the loss of trees, but there were also sort of positive associations with tree loss that came up. So many residents mentioned that there was like one particular tree that they weren't so sad to have to lose in the tornado. That came up a bunch of times where there was a tree that they didn't really like, and the tornado kind of took that tree down for them without having to pay a tree company. So that was an interesting response that I wasn't expecting. People did feel positively about having fewer landscaping responsibilities, less fewer leaves to rake, those kinds of things. Some people did different things with their yard. When their trees were all gone, they had sort of more creative space to think about how they wanted to intentionally design their yards. And maybe put up a shed or have a garden in a certain spot where they couldn't have one before. And some people, this topic of sun was really, was positive and negative for a lot of people, because people want to have some sun, but not too much sun, but not too much shade. So, people were sort of happy with having more sun for certain things, but also not happy with having too much sun. So then we talked about this impulse to replant. So residents that we interviewed were largely not hesitant to replant despite experiencing property damage. So like I said, even folks who had to completely rebuild their homes because a tree fell down through the center of their house, even those folks basically showed no hesitancy to replant, which was surprising. And we talked a little bit about tree fear as well. And residents really expressed that they did not feel fearful of trees, even when they had experienced pretty dramatic damage and loss associated with tree damage and tree failure in the tornado. But they did express sort of heightened attention to landscape decisions. So they didn't have fear, but they were more conscious of where they placed trees and how large those trees got. So people would say how they didn't feel afraid of trees, but they would definitely be more cognizant of where they planted large trees in relation to their home down the line. And the interesting thing here too was that without this planting program, the vast majority of interview subjects would not have planted trees on their own, due to a number of reasons, but most commonly lack of funds to buy their own trees or lack of bandwidth to think about planting. A lot of these residents were navigating complex insurance issues, rebuilding their homes, trying to get a new car, all these things. So planting a tree was really not on the top of their list. So when someone just knocked on their door and asked if they wanted a tree, it was really just a no-brainer. It made it easy for them to opt into tree planting, because it wouldn't have been on top of their list of to-dos otherwise. So just to kind of wrap all this up, so residents felt in this immediate aftermath, they felt pain and emotional stress as a result of the tornado and disorientation in an unfamiliar landscape. So they felt they had a hard time moving through the landscape. They had a hard time witnessing a dramatically changed landscape, particularly those who had lived for a long time in Springfield. In the midterm aftermath, there was this strong desire to replant, despite having experienced tree-related property damage, minimal fear of trees, but heightened awareness to risk. So this is one of the new trees at the time of planting, so back in 2011. And in the long term, there was a lot of appreciation for the impact of tree planting and its ability to recreate a nearly familiar landscape. So that was really an interesting point at the end too, which is that most residents acknowledged after this, decade, 12-ish years after the replanting, that the landscape was starting to look something like what they remembered it looking like before. But they also acknowledged that it didn't really look the same as it did before, because these streets, particularly East Forest Park and 16 acres, were lined with really, really large oak trees. So the canopy that exists today is really nowhere near what it was before the tornado. So there was a little bit of that, like, mixed feelings about how the landscape looks now. That it looks similar to what it was before, in that the trees are back and the trees are creating shade and defining the landscape, but they are not what they were before. So back to this concept that I presented at the beginning, which is solastalgia, and place attachment and disrupted place attachment. So this is kind of an interesting way that it intersected with the types of subject and responses that we had. So I mentioned at the beginning that many of the residents had lived in Springfield or the Western Mass area for most of their life, and a lot of research on place attachment shows that length of residency in a place creates a stronger place attachment. So we can sort of conclude that these folks probably had quite strong place attachment to Springfield, considering that many lived on the same street in the same neighborhood that they grew up in. So they had a very strong attachment to that place as near lifelong residents. We also know that length of residency is also associated with landscape familiarity and ease of navigation. So if we think about, places that you're more familiar with, you're able to move through those places more easily, with less reliance on maps or apps or whatever, and you know your way around. So the length of residency is associated with having a better ability to make your way around a place. So when people express that they were not able to find their way around a place that they felt so familiar to and felt so attached to, that was a particularly jarring experience for them, having lived there for most of their lives, and then suddenly not having this ability to navigate a place that they should have a very good ability to navigate. And there's also a lot of connections between home ownership and strong place attachment. And as I mentioned too, most of these residents were homeowners. So there's a connection in the literature that shows that homeownership is associated with sense of control over one's landscape and also stronger place attachment. So these residents really were able to make post-tornado decisions about their landscape because in large part because they were homeowners, and they were able to sort of enact their response to the solastalgia, the desire to recreate a landscape. They were able to enact that desire and put it into practice because they had control over their landscape. They had decision-making power over their yards. And again, what came up was that residents preferred what felt normal or similar to their pre-tornado landscape, even if they did not have a particular fondness for trees. So it seemed to me that in large part, the decision-making to replant was associated with a desire to have what was there before, as opposed to a desire to have trees specifically. So that was an interesting piece of it, and sort of provides a good explanation for the non-tree huggers that still opted in to replant, because it doesn't really make sense at first glance. And there's also a strong association in the literature between strong place attachment and negative feelings regarding place change. So if you're someone that has a strong place attachment, you're going to feel very negatively about changes to that place. If you're someone with a weak place attachment, you will have less negative feelings about place change. So you can see here that connects back to this desire to feel normal or to feel similar to the pre-tornado landscape. If people had very strong place attachments because of all these factors here, then this dramatic landscape change hit them very, very strongly. It would hit them stronger than it would have hit someone who was less connected to their place, to their home. So just a quick note on this: what does this all mean for practitioners? Because a lot of us are practitioners doing tree planting. So in terms of landscape reconstruction, we sort of uncovered that residents really want to reconstruct familiar landscapes. So planting trees where they were before, maybe species that were there before, and working with residents on this process of reconstruction, and not just thinking purely about ecosystem services. And also thinking about how do we prepare for natural disasters. So, in times of crisis, paying for navigating tree planting might not be a priority for residents, so they need to have opportunities presented to them for low cost or free trees in order to be able to opt into planting because their money is most likely going elsewhere in the context of disaster aftermath. And programs like this one are important for restoring landscape on private property where there's significant planting opportunity and space, particularly in areas where yards lost trees. It's important to put an emphasis on replanting in yards as well. And then one thing that came up at the very end was that residents desired a lot of follow-up, and some residents in the program felt that they wish they had more information and more follow-up during the programs. That was something that maybe could be different in a future program. All right. Any questions? I know that was a sort of a lot jam-packed in there, but if anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in.
That was a great presentation. So interesting. Yeah. It reminds me of we have a property up on Lake Champlain that was subject of a microburst that really got rid of, I mean, it knocked down like 80% of the trees, big white pines and hemlocks, and that word you said, solastasia, it just, that is exactly how I and my cousins felt about everything was so different. It was like so disarming that it wasn't familiar at all. Anyway, that was interesting. I have one question. Maybe you said this already, but why did you decide to limit the survey to just people who wanted to get new trees planted?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the paper is like has a lot of other stuff in it that I didn't get into here. And so one of those things is research limitations. So, I mean, no research project is perfect. So it's important to acknowledge the things that are missing from it. And when I first started this research, the first question I had was, how do we talk to the people who chose not to get trees? Because those are people I would like to hear from as well. Why do they not want trees? What felt hard or painful or terrible about replanting after a tornado? And the problem with that was that because it was an opt-in model, the people who, quote, opted out of getting trees would be everyone from the person who lost the mailing, never saw the mailing, all the way to someone who actually actively didn't want trees or was scared of trees. So it was going to be really hard to find those people because we didn't have contact information for them, and also just sort of not a uniform group because, like I said, some people didn't opt in because they just lost the flyer or something. So yeah, it was going to be sort of too challenging to be able to find people who actually had something to contribute in that category. But that is, I think, an important question for future research is well, we have some information now on why people choose to plant trees, but what barriers are there for people as well?
So,
Just a thought on that. If the people who worked with the residents, you could interview a couple of them and they could probably give you insights on somebody who maybe chose not to, or they probably have a lot of insight. They talk to a lot of people, I bet.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, I know there's most of you know probably Reed Green, Springfield down there. Some of those folks were doing the outreach. Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe in the absence of being able to talk to residents who didn't opt in, the people doing outreach. Yeah.
I've done a certain amount of outreach and I've heard a lot of the no stories and why.
Yeah. Yeah.
My grandfather started these hedges. I don't want the light to change.
Yeah.
My car was damaged in the 1970s. These sorts of things.
Uh,
Yeah.
Candace, I have a question. Has there been any follow-up since you did this study with the other two neighborhoods that actually had the least amount of planting that you're aware of?
Follow up in
Just,
terms of more planting efforts.
yeah, just like to follow up with them, not given that you have done this study and have this information, and now you recognize there was a high concentration of people that wanted to opt in, and I think it was East Forest Park
Mhm.
versus 16 acres and closer to the river. I forgot the neighborhood.
Yeah, it's like Metro Center. It's like the
Yeah,
downtown.
I'm just curious if the Regreen Springfield they're still planting and they're still active, but I was just wondering if those places had an opportunity to get more trees now that they've seen what happened like in East Forest Park and how that looks with new trees.
Yeah, I mean, I think Free Green for sure is always doing outreach into those areas, and they have funding through Green the Gateway Cities and that program. Um, I don't know how much they've and tried to you know point residents toward the changes in areas that got more trees, but I think that certainly could be helpful. I think, but I do think there are some challenges that are unchanged in those neighborhoods. Particularly owner occupancy rates, lot size. In the paper too, I could find it if it's, but just the lot sizes are like dramatically smaller in those neighborhoods. So I think more of the replanting that did happen in the neighborhoods was street tree replanting, which is certainly great and wonderful, but sort of divorces people a little bit from choice over their landscape, which was part of the questions that we had. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's a good question.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm wondering if the planting was limited to right of way and setback trees like our city planting program is, or were you able to plant in people's backyards as well?
Yeah, it wasn't limited. So backyards, front yards, right of way, trees are planted all over, and some residents got more than one tree. Didn't seem to be a lot of limitations.
Maybe you said, I apologize, but did they have choices?
Species choices. They did. They had like sort of a limited choice. I think there was a short list of species they could get. I think one of the things that people expressed concerns about in this, over a decade later, was that they had species choices, but they didn't have information provided to them about those species. So they would be like, "Oh yeah, an elm. That sounds nice," and then no one told them that an elm was like a very large shade tree. So there were some people that felt that even though they had choice, it wasn't like real choice because it wasn't informed choice. So I think that could be maybe a good shift for future programs is give people the choice and then also make sure they have all the necessary information around that choice.
Did
Yeah.
they get any follow-up or support, like were the trees trained or trimmed?
Not really. They were provided with a booklet. Most residents forgot they were provided with the booklet or had lost it. There were a couple that were like dug in the messy drawer you have in your kitchen where you shove all your random things. A couple people like dug through that drawer during the interview and were able to produce the booklet they had gotten 12 years earlier. But that was pretty much it. And I think that was a concern that came up again and again too, that people were really happy to have the trees, but felt like they didn't really know what to do with them as they matured. Some residents, there was sort of a similar spectrum that we see with in a lot of places where some residents knew to hire licensed arborists, some residents had their landscaper, do tree pruning. And some trees hadn't really been touched at all in 10 years, and could have used some training.
That's really interesting. It made me think of, when you've lived in a place for a long period of time and you have a landscape that you moved basically into. You bought a home or you renting in a place for long term. The landscape sort of came with the property.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, within a matter of 20 minutes, that landscape doesn't exist any longer.
Hmm.
You want that landscape to return to this familiar surrounding. But once the landscape comes back, you're not really sure what to do with it.
Hmm.
There and then do like now I'm responsible for maintaining it because before I didn't have to do anything. I just showed up and it was there and it was great and it
Hmm.
was green and I had shade at the certain time of the day. The leaves are a nuisance, but I moved them around, but now I'm responsible for taking care of these plants. Um, it's kind of a very interesting study. And I'm I it just what's really interesting to me, I think, is the amount of people that actually wanted trees that were not necessarily people that love trees in comparison, because that's always a big issue that we have is that we've planted 2,500 trees in Northampton, and all the places that we've been to where we've planted trees, the majority of people have really they care for them, they love them, they've asked for them. So
Hmm.
now we're sort of down in the weeds, and for example, we went up to Ryan Road, which is out in the Ward 6, and Molly and Sue went out there and put a bunch of stakes out, and I must have gotten like 3 or 4 emails from people that were like, I didn't have a choice in this stake. What kind of tree is it going to be? I don't
Hmm.
want the tree. I can't back out of my driveway. So it's unfortunate, but it's almost like there has to be a natural disaster or some terrible event to make people realize, well, wait. I actually really wanted that tree that was in the front yard that when I moved in. So it's interesting. I'm not advocating we go cut down a bunch of trees in Northampton and then start over again just to make our point, but
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, there definitely was a lot of like, don't know what you've got till it's gone kind of
yes,
sentiments thrown around by folks. And I think, yeah, it does like, I think it's the reason to plan for natural disaster replantings. I think obviously, when trees are lost, it's important to replant them. But I think it does like these disasters could present unique opportunities for replanting when there are people that might not in any other situation have opted into a tree in this moment of sort of disruption and disorientation and distress might sort of opt in um, when they maybe wouldn't have before, just in an effort to have what was there before and to have things look like how they looked before. Because yeah, I really think that it seemed like that was the common denominator because the common denominator wasn't a love for trees. The common denominator really was like, well, there was a tree there before, so I put it back. um, and so I think that's it's important to be prepared for having programs like this because it's just like it's a really interesting moment to get trees in the ground. And I think too, I don't have evidence for this, but what we know about place attachment is that people develop attachments and familiarity with their place over time. So if you leave the landscape treeless for a longer period of time, people become familiar to that as well. People can become familiar to a treeless landscape and comfortable in a treeless landscape. So if you have a natural disaster and then you leave the landscape without trees for a long time, it might then become hard to convince people that they actually want trees because they've become, used to that new landscape.
interesting. Sue, and then Molly.
Oh, I've heard that the energy use for houses when the trees are all destroyed um, can can be fairly dramatic. I was just curious if you had looked at any of that or were able to access that. It's another way that it affects maybe the way people think about their trees.
Yeah, we didn't look at any like hard data on that. Like I didn't ask for anyone's like um you know electrical bills or gas bills or anything, but anecdotally, yes, people said they were spending a lot
I
more on
thought
air
it
conditioning.
was
Um,
publicly available or not.
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know, actually. I could look that up.
Energy usage.
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's a
I
really
don't
good.
know. I don't know.
No, no, now I want to do. I didn't even think about doing that. That's a really good point.
I
Yeah,
know they have this thing on our, you could tell like who uses like the usage. I don't know.
like
Maybe
historical
not
usage
publicly
data and
available,
stuff.
but I don't think it would be too difficult to get.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I want to find that now.
Another,
But yeah, anecdotally, people were like, yes, it was, so hot in my house for the summer. I had
oh,
air for air conditioning. So definitely people did talk about that.
Hmm.
But I should look that up. Historical energy use data.
go ahead, Molly.
Yeah, thank you. What you said about people's attachment to what's familiar, that's what I was gonna comment on is like that's such an important point because it says that it's really important to those of us who want to have a good tree canopy, it's important to go in and replace it soon, so that people don't lose that attachment and start to get used to what it looks like without trees. Um, yeah, it's important to act quickly. And that it's sort of it's interesting. It's just like connected to other things too, like other kind of environmental changes. Um, for example, like um, let's see, what would be an example? Um, I don't know, things that change and people don't know what it was before. Um, I'm not thinking of any examples. They don't know what they're missing. They don't know what it was like before, so they just get used to the degraded condition they have now
Mhm,
and don't know that it could really be any better or that it ever was any better.
mhm.
Same thing, like, I mean, you could say that politically, there's probably like a lot of different areas where people get used to things a certain way and forget that there's another way that it could be.
Yeah, exactly. Our brains for our survival, our brains are very good at adaptation and adapting to conditions.
Right.
So, um, yeah, getting those trees in the ground before our brains adapt ourselves to treeless conditions.
Mm.
Sure.
Any other questions? Well, Candace, thank you very much. That was a very informative presentation. We appreciate the taking that you took the time to come to our meeting. I also truly appreciate from the bottom of my heart that you saved the tree in your backyard. So I'm always an advocate for trying to keep private tree canopy as much as possible, even though I have no jurisdiction over any of it. But thank you. And when your research is uh, published and public, if you wouldn't mind possibly sharing that with us, that would be great.
Yeah, I will. It should be probably within the next month.
Article, I should
And
say.
yeah, if you feel about nerding out for 30 pages. It's a lot. It's a lot more detailed. It's a lot richer. I think the nice part about reading it is that there's a ton of quotes in there, really great quotes from the interviews. So that's kind of fun to dig through. Is reading people's actual words is I think cool. So I'll share it when it comes out.
Thank
Can
you.
I just mention real quick, Rich? Hey, Rich, it's Rick Harper. How are
Hey,
you?
good, Rick. How are you? Good to see
Good.
you.
Yeah, nice job, Candace. Sorry, I only caught the last couple slides, but she'll be speaking in March on the Urban Forestry Day webcast. So we can all sit and listen for 60 minutes. But thanks everybody for tuning in. And Candace, great job as always.
For those of you who don't know, Rick Harper, urban forester extraordinaire at UMass, my advisor. So Rick is always awesome, always doing cool
Your visor
urban
consists of
forestry
being
stuff
a
in Worcester.
cheerleader. So I'm happy to be your cheerleader, Candace. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
And
you.
thank you, Candace. Good to see you, Rich.
Take care, Rick. Thank you. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting if you like, but if you can't, that's fine too. We got about a little over about 20 minutes or so.
Sure, I'll stick around.
All right. Thank you. Our next item on our agenda is the fall tree planting update and wrap up. Jen,
Muted.
muted.
Hi, you want
Okay.
me to share my
Sure, if that would make your presentation go smoother, absolutely.
Let me see if I can figure this out. Wait a minute.
You should be a co-host.
Hold on a second. Uh, Share my screen. Oh, I'm such a rube. Hold on a second. Oh God, I even opened it up. How do I get to
You gotta double click. It's hard with a trackpad.
double?
Like when you
don't
hit
get-
share screen, you see a bunch of different screens. Whatever you have open, it's gonna show. And then you like choose
Oh, yeah,
one
yeah.
that you want and double
How come
click on it.
it's not, that's weird. I've got it open, but it's not showing up.
Want
Come
to
on.
email it to me and I'll.
In the email that Rich sent. That is really
Oh.
weird.
Right, so any of us could.
Oh, hold on.
It's up, it's up, it's up.
Yeah,
There it is.
You got
there
it.
is. Yep.
Okay. Okay, that was magic. I don't know how that happened. All right. All right. Well, okay.
Beautiful. It's a thing
Sorry
of
about
beauty.
that, everybody. So this is just for the fall. Just a summary of what we did this fall. So we planted a total of 69 trees in 9 different plantings. We are planting Wednesday morning and Saturday mornings, as we usually do. We started planting the beginning of October. We didn't plant it all in September because it was so dry. And then we stopped when we did, partly because we kind of had matched all the spaces we had fully dig safed and available to put in the ground. And also the temperatures at night were starting to decrease, and it's hard to deal with the root balls once they get frozen, and we don't have a way to keep them from being unfrozen, etc. So here's the breakdown. 30 of those trees were in tree belts, 20 were in setbacks, which is I would predict that's kind of going to be increasing in numbers because that's the places we really have available now. We've planted many of the available tree belts. I'm sure there's a few somewhere, spaces somewhere. Right away, we had 8 trees, and the right away in that reference is where there are no sidewalk, or it's something like the end of a cul-de-sac is owned by the city. Each street has a measurement of right away. And then I also included right of way / park, which were things like Armour Street parking lot. We had 11 trees between that parking lot, the Sojourner Truth Parklet, Florence Field, I call it the Burt's Pit Dog Park. It's not really officially that, but and there's a little parklet, kind of a triangle of green space at Trumbull and Prospect where we replaced a tree. The percentage breaks down. 29% of the trees we planted were setbacks, 39% were replacements, and that included tree belts, setbacks, and right away. That's a pretty high percentage for us. Normally that is not average. Previously we were, our survival rate was like 95+%. We very rarely had replacements, but there could be, I don't have any data for this or anything, but there could be some of the possible contributing factors is we had a pretty severe fall drought in 2024, and also we had another one at the end of this summer, and previous to that we had some drought too. So we also switched over to the watering device tree diapers, and some of it was, I think Rich said we didn't have quite the right size. And also more than 1 year watering out. Our DPW is, pretty stressed in staffing, and it's hard to get the trees watered. In some places, we have some kind of poor soil, particularly compaction. We had to replace a bunch of trees on Ridgeview Road, and that was the case out there. It's a newer development. And I mean, those tree belts are just, I don't know what they ran over that a million times, but they were very, very compacted. Some of the stock we put out was overwintered, and, depending on the winter, sometimes we have some issues with that. We had a couple trees that were run over by automobiles, and there's always quality of stock. I feel like in general we get very good stock, but a certain percentage is uncontrollable where the root balls aren't really great for whatever reason. Maybe they were planted too deep by one person in the nursery or whatever. So that's kind of the general, my general thoughts. I don't know if Tree Warden Rich has other thoughts about why our percentages might be a little bit higher. A couple of highlights. I know this commission
Can I ask
has.
a question?
Oh yes, absolutely.
I wonder if the root ball quality also, I mean, there's a whole bunch of factors, but it could be compounded by those droughts too.
Mm.
So like it kind of reverberates the poor thing.
Right.
Never.
Right.
Some of them just didn't have roots sometimes, or
Right.
they had really, really crazy roots.
Right. Right.
A lot of issues. Go on.
So some highlights. I know that this commission has been interested in populating more trees in the urban core within a quarter of a mile of the city center to mitigate the heat island effects. This fall we planted 20 trees, I think, in the quarter mile. Don't I didn't measure it, but it was a ballpark estimate. If we include Hubbard Ave in the quarter mile, which I don't know if that is, that's down by the rotary that goes towards Hadley, it would rise to 28. 10 of the trees planted were planted in Armory Street in the Armory Street parking lot. They were ash replacements. And that's right smack in the center of downtown. We did have cooperation and assistance from the parking division that Tree Warden Rich helped to organize. They have an auger that they loosened up the soil in both the tree pits and the parking lot islands where we planted. We completed the Hubbard Avenue neighborhood planting. There was 8 underwire trees, and on the opposite side, there's probably another 7 or 8 that we planted previously, larger trees in the spring. In one property that was close to downtown, the corner of State and Summer Street, was a newly renovated building that was a condo association. Christina Peterson, our setback coordinator, got 4 trees in that corner property of Summer and State. It's a very walkable area of the city, and 3 of those trees were medium to large trees. So
she should get steak knives or something.
Really, something, the toaster oven. I don't know, something. Yeah. And we do have a Northampton High School student who's kind of doing an informal internship with Tree Northampton. I met him when we were bagging tree whips with the science classes for Arbor Day, and he's come to a bunch of several plantings. I met with him several times to kind of find out his interest and what we could do for him. Rich Parrish is going to connect with him to get him out pruning. He's interested in doing that. And I hope to have him out to possibly site some trees with me and do some dig safes and look at the markings after they get dig safed for spring 2026. and we're hoping to get a little sit down with the tree warden, Rich. One other thing that I should tell you that two things. There was a young woman named Paloma. I can't remember her last name off the top of my head, but she's a student at Connecticut College, and I think Rich, tree warden Rich, you spoke to her. She's interested in urban forestry and does some urban forestry down there. She interviewed me about she's doing a research project about connections with academic institutions and nonprofits that work in urban forestry. And I think in the future, so I did an interview with her the other day on Monday about that. And I asked her if she'd be interested in coming after she compiles this it's like a senior capstone project that if she'd be willing to come and speak to the Urban Forestry Commission. So, and just one other quick thing that doesn't have to do with planting, is that I'm not sure if people know, if we already talked about this, that we do have it's been determined that we do have a breeding population level of spotted lanternfly now in the city of Northampton. I'm not sure if we talked about that, but just so. Does anybody have any questions about anything?
I have a quick question.
Yep.
The Ridgeview Road trees, so is it the trees were replaced there, but is the soil still compacted?
Yeah, I mean, it's always better to replace when you dig a replacement tree because we already dug the hole. So yeah. And though, yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you think that new ones will have a better prospect of surviving because of what? Because of like less drought, the compounding of factors?
Yeah, and we put different trees in there. Yeah, I mean, well, no, that's not true. We put the trees. I think some of the trees also were kind of like some of the root balls weren't great, just randomly, the ones we put up there. So,
And soil should be a little better because with 2 rounds, they've
compost,
there's a lot more organic matter in
Right.
that little
That's
spot
true.
than there was the first time we planted them.
Yeah.
I was just looking at the Google map of that street, and there's a lot of like trees along the road there. How many did you have to replace there on Ridgeview?
Oh,
Roughly, just roughly.
Was the whole thing ash replacement to begin with?
No,
yes.
that was, oh,
Yeah.
isn't that a different place?
Yeah, they were all ash replacements.
No, they were all ash, and I think there were 14 or 15 trees.
Oh,
Total. And then I'd say maybe 7 we had to replace or something.
We had like 25 or so high school kids helping us when we planted to replace the ash. I don't know if that's a factor. And then yeah, we replaced how many of them anyway.
I'd say my ballpark is like 7 or something like that.
Yeah.
I'd have to look on this other sheet, but
it was some of it was really hard digging with the high school kids. They worked and worked to get those holes dug.
Yeah.
And the soils were awful.
Yeah,
and a lot of the roots were hard to deal with that we had.
Yeah. And I guess you mentioned something about the spring. I have a small group of, Ryan Road and JFK, and David wanted to talk about that. Yeah, I have a short list of spaces that also the neighborhood planting on starts with an S.
Sherman.
Sherman, thank you.
Mm.
Yeah, so we have some in the works, but if people have ideas, please send them our way.
Mm.
So, David, you want to talk about JFK?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I just so the basketball court and
Mhm.
tennis courts were renovated, as some of you might have seen, but there are granite curbed beds now that are just wanting trees.
Mhm.
So planting those out and then replacing some of the dead and struggling trees that were planted in April, probably because of the late frost,
Mm.
or who knows why. And then adding a bunch of trees along the Spring Grove Cemetery fence.
Mm.
I think if you add up all those potential plantings, it comes out to 20 trees.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So it could be another Rotary opportunity potentially.
I'm sorry, say that again. So it would be the JFK
Uh-huh.
and where else?
Oh, it's,
Yeah, just 20 at JFK.
Oh,
He was talking about different areas at JFK, like by the basketball court and along
Correct.
the fence
That's
of
right.
the cemetery.
That's right. Three different kind of planting areas within JFK.
got it. Basketball court, cemetery, and the pull in, the other.
yeah, there was a few that we need to get replaced. Some of the tulip trees, and there was one or two.
The stock issues.
Yeah,
That spot by the basketball court, I remember the trees that were there before, and they were really uh beat up from all the use there. Like a lot of soil compact, like kids just like walking, in that within that raised bed area, just it gets trampled down. And I think also the trees were just like I don't know, they just looked like they had taken a beating from, I don't know, kids like hanging on them or breaking the branches or walking all around them or so I don't know if there's any like consideration of what kind of trees to plant there and or like how to protect them from junior high school kids.
Nothing with thorns.
Thorns,
No,
yeah.
not thorns.
Oh no,
We don't want to
thorns.
hurt the children if they're doing that to the trees. Not thorns, to be clear.
I think a lot of mulch and probably some fertilization in their future and decompacting the soils. Same thing for Ridgeview. Same thing for like the trees we planted at Forbes Library. Like I've got them on a schedule to have the soil decompacted. So I think that's sort of, plant healthcare prescriptions for those tough places is sort of what, and matching that with the appropriate species that can handle the droughty area and stressful area that's in this, directly in the sun constantly. So
Maybe also some species that grows quickly that um, could outgrow the tender stage faster.
I have a suggestion. I think we should have a thing called a chia tree.
A chia tree?
Chia tree. Yep. And we should give them out to every student for the holiday. Chia
Oh,
tree.
What is that?
That's like the chia pet that would be advertised on television when I was young. Of course, I'm
oh.
older, but
So they would learn to
Chia.
take
yeah.
care of it?
Yes, I think it's a great investment. We can talk offline about that.
Oh,
So, Molly,
interesting.
I'm pulling your leg.
No, I know, but it's an interesting thought. What makes me think about is like I wonder if there's a way to engage the students in taking care of the tree so they have a sense of like um stewardship for the tree in the trees. Like I don't know, you have teams like they have different teams at JFK of teachers and students like maybe each tree could be with one team and the teams could be in charge of like they would have a responsibility for the trees like putting mulch on it or fertilizing it or something like that. I don't know.
It's actually it's a good point. David, I think you have an in with the folks at JFK. I don't know if if there is an environmental club of students. I've never met with
I
any
think
of them
so.
there, but I'm not sure if that would be something that we would think about trying to engage after we do this next round of planting.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I can look into that and see if there is
Okay.
such a club. It's a good
Okay.
idea, Molly.
Or else you could, I don't know, talk to the science teachers, on each team. Maybe it could be some kind of science related thing.
Mhm.
One thing I did in Providence once, which worked well, was I think it's great to engage the students in stewardship. That would be like so cool. But for students or teachers that don't have the capacity for that, um, you get them to name the trees. And then the students like have fun. Kids have so much fun naming trees. It's shocking. um, and so if there's not capacity for stewardship, then I don't know, the kids get to name the trees. Someone puts a stick in the ground with a name on it, and suddenly like they care a lot more.
That is a great idea. Yeah. And there could be some kind of a thing hanging around the tree with the name of the tree, the tree's name on it.
Thank you. We have a couple of minutes left, and I think that Rich, you have a little bit of an update for us on the winter pruning workshop.
Yes, I polled the potential volunteers as to their interest, and I have about 12 interested parties and some others who have unspoken as of yet. And I proposing that I do a Zoom uh, tree care seminar on Tuesday, December 2nd. And because that's most people are available at that time. I'm also open to the possibility of doing a second one on, say, the Thursday, the 4th.
What
Just
time?
to like 4 o'clock, 4 till 5:30. Um, that would give the most people the opportunity to observe that seminar. So I will send out something shortly to those volunteers for a Zoom invite for that. And I can set that meeting up here, Rich. How's about that?
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Can you send an invitation to us too? I think I would like to go to that.
No,
No.
there's an issue of we don't want the commission having a quorum at one of these
Oh,
seminars.
right,
So
right.
I can send you the PowerPoint file,
Oh, okay,
that,
okay. Sure,
so
that's
that
good.
you'll see the same thing they do.
Okay, that's great.
All right, then just one last comment on the tree maintenance program. I'm still, kicking around some ideas. It's at this point, it is still a concept, but at the tree seminar in December, and then there's going to be a social event the second week of December for all the tree volunteers. I will roll out this idea to our existing core of volunteers to see what kind of interest level there is in them picking up tree maintenance tasks during the summer. Because without volunteers, we don't have a program. So that would be one of the first steps to see what kind of interest we have in that. And then separately, I'm going to probably send Rich and maybe Sue some correspondence to try to get some ideas to help fill in the blanks on the tree maintenance ideas that I have there, just to help firm those up. So you can expect something from me down the road. Okay.
Thank you. Any questions for Rich?
Oh, huge thanks to him and Jen before him for the amount of work these reports and things take is a lot. Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you. And thank you to our guest speaker, Candace. Appreciate you taking the time to
Yeah.
come
Thank
and present
you.
to us, and don't be a stranger. We're here twice a month. So if you're looking for something to do on a first and the third Wednesday of the month, we're here.
Yeah, keep me on the email list.
Okay, you got it.
Please
All
come
right.
and maybe you'd like to plant or prune.
I would love that.
There we go, Rich. There, we got a volunteer now.
Sign me up. It would have to be a weekend, but sign me up.
Can we get your email from Rich?
Yes, I will.
Thank
I'll
you.
forward it to you, Sue.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
coming.
thank you, everyone. Could I get a motion to adjourn the meeting, please? If there's no other business. Kent, did you raise your hand?
I'm muted. I'm so moved.
Okay, there's a motion. There's a motion. Is there a second, please?
I'll second.
All right, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please raise your hand. All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you. Have a
Bonnie.
good evening. Yep.